that's why I love real estate, is because you can make, I mean, you can pretty much make an infinite amount of money and pay no taxes on it. I actually did a video about how Donald Trump pays no taxes, and
Yep.
people were pretty pissed off at me for making that video. But what I did is I just showed, hey, like, love him or hate him, this is what you can do when you're an owner of real estate, and you can
Yeah.
make hundreds of millions of dollars and pay no taxes legally. What's up, peeps? This is Todd, and welcome back to my show. I have Andrew Barta on the show today, and he wants to get into real estate. So I'm just going to let him ask questions, and hopefully it'll be helpful to you guys as well. So welcome, Andrew.
Well, thank you for having me, Todd. And it's awesome to be able to ask you these questions. I'm sure that plenty of people that are considering this hopefully have similar questions and you can address them to like a wider audience. But yeah, essentially, I'm in this position right now and I'm in Charlotte. So the Charlotte real estate market is quite, well, reasonably priced comparable to other places in the US. I've lived in Seattle before, Denver, other places where a starter house is typically going to run you anywhere from 5 to 700,000. Down here in Charlotte, there's this. I think the median home value is like 350. And right now, what I'm doing is I've got like this lump sum that I'm trying to figure out if it's worth getting into real estate investment, or if I should just be putting this money into like low or no fee index funds and just let it grow over time. So essentially, I guess where I'm at and what I'm looking for is to figure out like what is a comfortable rate to be putting down for a an investment property. And to expand on this a little bit further, for at least my situation, is that I live in an apartment right now, but the lease is ending. I'm tired of paying rent where I'm not building up money into my asset. And so like if I'm looking at the next 12 to 18 months, it's like I could be putting, either I'm going to get another apartment or rent something, or I could be putting money into an asset theoretically, and then it would go from being a primary residence to an investment property. So that's kind of where I'm at, and what I was hoping to pick your brain on is that, let's say that if I had 10% of a $250,000 house, so 25K to put down, is that enough to put into a house right now? And then over the next year to 18 months, get up to that 20% to take off the PMI, the mortgage insurance, and then start renting it out? Or do you think it might be safer to just be putting that money into like an index fund right now?
Great questions. First of all, it's awesome that you're wanting to get into investing. So congrats to that.
Yeah.
A couple of things. So $25,000, 10% down. First of all, $25,000 is definitely enough to start investing in real estate. The down payment of my first house was 19,000,
Okay.
and yeah, so it was 19 grand. Sorry,
And that was in Seattle too.
that was in Seattle, which will actually bring me to my next thing. Is you don't have to put 10% down unless. Let me clarify. Is this your first time buying a house?
It is.
Okay. So I used a first time home buyer program where I got away with 3.5% down,
Mhm.
but many lenders have a new program where you can actually put 5% down the first time you buy a home and pay no PMI.
Oh,
Yes. So instead of worrying about getting up to the 20%, or excuse me, the 80% loan to value, the 20% equity to get rid of that PMI, you could actually, depending on what bank you use, so do some research there, you can put 5% down, owner occupied, your first house, and pay no PMI.
okay. Now that's good to know.
Yes.
That knocks off, and I've got like a little list here. But that's like I was trying to put some of the pros and cons to it, and like the cons, or at least what I thought was a con, and this can come both ways because since interest rates are so low right now, there's an argument to be said for putting the least amount of money down, because the interest rates that I've been seeing, and I don't know if they're going to go up, down. People are speculating that they're going to go up in the near future. But it's like a 2.8% interest rate. It's like, well, put as little down as you can and hold on to your cash and be able to do other things with that, because the borrowing of money is so cheap right now.
Correct. So basically, for anyone out there, if they were having trouble following that last part, basically it's like this: you can borrow money at such a low interest rate now. Right now, you can borrow hundreds of thousands of dollars. You can borrow millions of dollars at under 3%, and you can take that money and invest it in a way that brings in more than 3%. So
Right.
that's basically what we're talking about here. So, yeah, I mean, here's the deal: I've made money in real estate, I've made money in stocks, and I've made money in crypto. So I won't ever come out and say one is better than the other. I will say that when you buy real estate, you have some benefits that you don't necessarily have with crypto and stocks. So the first thing is I'm assuming that the property you would buy in Charlotte, you'd live there too, right? At least starting out.
At least starting out, yeah.
Okay, so you basically would you house hack it or just live in there by yourself?
Well, I might house hack it, but that depends on some personal things and if a proposal happens down the road, because then I might be having somebody else come live with me. But for the immediate future, I think I would house hack it and like rent out a room to a buddy or something.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I would do that because you're still pretty young, right? What are you like 26?
Just turned 28.
You just turned 28?
Yeah.
Okay, well that's still incredibly young. So
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's because I don't know. I'm 28, and I assumed I was a lot older than you. I
Yeah.
don't probably because you have a baby face and I look like an old man.
No,
But it's a compliment. Don't worry, you're going to age very well. So
perfect.
here's what I would do. I mean, because you're basically going to pay rent somewhere, and what does rent go for in your area? I'm not familiar with Charlotte.
Right now for the 900 square foot, like one bedroom place, I'm paying, well, it's 950 and then I pay an extra 100 for the garage. It's like 1100 after utilities and stuff. 1100.
Okay, and so what would your mortgage payment be? Do you think if you put 5% down on a $250,000 house?
If
You
I
know,
could PMI off, it'd probably be like 1,000 to 1,200, depending on it.
so you could
Uh,
essentially buy a house and own it for about what it costs you to rent it, and then what could you rent a room for like 400 or $500?
yeah, probably 500.
I mean, here's the deal, man. So you could essentially cut your living expenses in half. You could be paying down an asset that eventually is going to be paid off for you.
Yeah.
You have depreciation, which means you're going to be able to make an income on it and not pay taxes.
And
For any
big thing. I've been watching your
Yes.
other YouTube videos, and I was like, well, any profit, because the moment that I do, well, sorry, and I cut you off there.
No, no, no. Go ahead.
Well, that was, it kind of goes into my next line of questioning is the investment property. Like once I move out of that house and turn it into an investment property, what are the complications there on like how do you set up like an S corp that is then a holder for all of your real estate, and then you have it separate as like a separate income source? Or I guess what's a good approach to set that up?
Sure, good question. So the first thing is, let's say you buy a house, owner occupied, primary residence, and you're renting out rooms, or if you have like a duplex, you're renting out the other half, whatever it is.
Mhm.
As soon as you leave that house, there's nothing that you have to do to convert it into an investment property. You keep the tenants in there, or you put new tenants in there if the old ones left or whatever, and you move on to the next deal. That's what I've done every time. Now, if you want to get it into a business entity, I would actually recommend an LLC,
Okay.
and that just protects you a little bit more. But with just one house, and there's going to be some mixed opinions on this, for just one house, I wouldn't say that having an LLC is necessary because you're going to have liability insurance, and the insurance is pretty much going to cover you for anything as long as you get a good policy. And then it's going to also have duty to defend. So on all my real estate, we do have an LLC, but we have 6 properties. But I also have liability insurance, and then I have an umbrella policy, which I think has an extra like $5 million liability limit, as well as a couple of other things. But yeah, was the LLC, was that question specifically for like tax purposes or just in general?
Yeah, well, because I was wondering if I'm weighing the two options of like just putting money into some, I guess into like stocks, pretty much, and like
Mhm.
index funds, that sort of thing, or if I'm going to be putting this money into starting off my journey into investing in real estate, then it's like, is there a tax advantage to one or the other? And it sounds like taxes on index funds, and stocks, that's a whole different conversation. But it seems like there are some tax advantages um, to investing in real estate and running things that way. Because of the depreciation schedule, you're able to write things off and pretty much not have to pay a lot of federal income tax.
Yes. So the other thing you're going to want to look at is, let's say you put money in stocks, and then eventually you sell the stocks, because that's how you make a profit in stocks, and you can get
Right.
dividends and stuff. But the way you make a profit on your return is you sell. As a single person, you can make up to $80,000 in capital gains and pay no capital gains tax. So that's pretty awesome. Um,
But doesn't it
or-
just count as your income?
I'm sorry.
Because I thought if you sell within a 12-month period, doesn't it just count? And if you take your gains from there, doesn't it just count against your income?
Yes, so that's the thing is I wouldn't recommend selling before 12 months. And
Right.
I misspoke. For a single person, it's 40,000. For if you're married, it can be 80,000 up to tax free and capital gains. But for you,
Okay.
so let's say for example, I'm just going to weigh two options here. Let's say you put money in stocks, and the idea is you hold it for 18 months and then you sell, versus putting money in real estate for 18 months and then you sell. Not that you'd have to sell in either option, but
Right.
with stocks, you can make as an individual person $40,000 of profit in capital gains before you have to start paying taxes on them. With real estate, if you sell that house as your primary residence, you can make up to $250,000 tax free instead of just 40,000. So if there's going to be a huge gain, it would behoove you to buy real estate because you can get a way better, a way more income without having to pay taxes on it. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And is that just like a standard? Um, that's a standard rate for every investment property. It's up to 250,000, or is it just investment properties no matter how many you have?
So that's specifically for the sale of a primary residence when you're single.
Okay,
If you're married, you can make up to $500,000 and pay no capital gains tax on it.
I see.
So that's a really good reason for buying real estate. But I will say this: stocks are so much more liquid, right? I mean, you could get in and out of a market in seconds with stocks, where if with real estate, you got to put it on the market unless you sell it off market. But there's a lot more steps and process to sell that thing, and a case could be made that if you're only investing for the short term, stocks actually might be the better route to go just because of risk. And the
Right.
reason why I say that is because I am actually predicting that we're going to have a real estate crash in 2022.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, I do not believe it's coming in 2021. A lot of financial experts think it's coming in 2021. I think it's going to be 2022.
Well, and that goes into another conversation, which is why I was even looking at real estate, even though I don't plan on staying in this house that I'm contemplating buying for a long time, was because I have this money and I'm like, okay, I don't really want to put it into the market because it feels bloated and unpredictable right now. It feels like because of all the stimulus money that came in and everything else, I keep hearing like the Fed's printing money and it's not sustainable. And I'm like, it seems like real estate would be more stable because ever since 2008 and the crash that happened there, it's like, haven't they tried to correct those things? And it felt like a safer investment, but I didn't know about a potential housing, not well, crash or uh, downslide in 2022. What makes you say that?
Right, good question. And I will say, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't predict the future. But basically, here's what I'm looking at. Um, because of the coronavirus pandemic, a lot of people have been laid off from their jobs,
Yep.
and about 6 or 7% of all mortgages have gone unpaid since the pandemic. Now, usually what would happen is banks would foreclose on properties where the mortgages aren't paid. But part of the stimulus package was a moratorium on foreclosures. So that's probably going to get extended into 2021. Now, what happens is once that moratorium is over, the the foreclosure process can take 8 to 12 months. So if
Mhm.
it starts in 2021, it won't be until 2022 until those houses are actually foreclosed on. Then what will happen is the bank is going to take back all these homes, and they're going to want to get rid of them because they're not making any money on them. So those houses, in my opinion, what I'm thinking, they're probably going to sell for 30 to 70 cents on the dollar because the banks just want to get rid of them. So the value of those houses will come down, people can buy. So on the one hand, stocking up cash, living cheaply, living as cheap as you can for the next couple of years just to hold on to a big cash pile, that's a good idea too, because then you'll have all this cash to go shopping for real estate when it's on discount.
Right. Well, and that was the other side. I guess you could put this in the con column of uh, thinking about investment property right now is that supply is super low, interest rates are super low, so that's making demand really high, and houses are staying afloat right now because people are still wanting to buy. I don't know if supply is low because there's a global pandemic and less people are trying to move at this point in time, but at least down here in the Charlotte market, houses are just going like that. And so I'm sure that that's part of the reason that houses are a little bit more expensive right now. But luckily, more expensive down here isn't anything outlandish compared to other places in the U.S.
Right, totally. So here's what I think. I mean, the tricky part is I make all of my investments thinking about like 20 years in the future.
Right.
So I've never made an investment with the idea like, what's this going to be like in the next 18 months? I don't actually care, what it's going to be. What I want to know is 15, 20, 30 years from now, did I make a lot more money than I put in? And I've already done that in Seattle because the Seattle market is super crazy. It's insane. But I do think, I think there's a lot of benefits to real estate because if you buy this house, even if the market does dip in a couple of years, you need a place to live regardless. Yep. It sounds like your mortgage payment won't be that much more than the apartment that you're renting. Yep. And if you can house hack it, get a roommate, then you'll actually be living for less. Plus you get the depreciation, you get to deduct the interest because you have a pretty high income. So if you can deduct that interest, that would be good too. The only thing that I can think of is if you take this $25,000, $30,000 and buy real estate and the real estate market tanks, it's the opportunity cost of what could that money have done for you instead. Because you could also just stay renting an apartment and have a roommate in your apartment for a couple years too.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. And then I could, theoretically put, the opportunity cost of that money being in like an index fund or doing something else with it where it could make a greater return.
Yes.
And okay, these are all great things to consider. And then another aspect of it, moving on to once it was no longer a primary residence and I turned it into a full investment property. I guess two questions here. The first one has to do with maintenance and upkeep and all of those things. The houses that I'm looking at for that 250 to 300K mark, you can get some that are a little bit newer, like built in the 2000s and probably in good shape. Some of the ones I'm looking at, because I want this to be a primary residence for the next 12 to 18 months, are built in like the 1980s. And I'm assuming that there's a lot of work to be done. Now, some of that's easy remodeling stuff, putting up new backsplashes in the kitchen or redoing a bathroom or something. But I'm kind of fearful of things like copper piping that needs to be replaced and all these other things that might be bigger hidden costs that I'm not considering. Any words of advice on that front from looking at age of properties and things to consider?
Yes. So to my friends, I have a lot of friends that do flipping. Yep. And what they tell me is it's always more expensive than what you think it's going to be. So okay. Always, no matter what. I have been quite fortunate that I've always built new construction homes.
Yep.
So every property that I have was brand new when I bought it. So and under warranty, so there are no maintenance problems. But yeah, for an older home, there are going to be some maintenance things here and there, and especially if you want to move on, who knows how far you're going to be moving from that house? You could be moving 2 hours out of the way. If you have to drive 2 hours to go replace a downspout that falls off because it's old or whatever, hopefully you can get a good property manager. But that, of course, eats into your profit. But that's what I would recommend if you're going to be managing it remotely. But the maintenance and stuff is added cost. I do think as far as a cash-on-cash return, I haven't found anything as good as house hacking that isn't super volatile like crypto. So like I had a good experience with crypto where I bought in and I immediately tripled my money and then I sold everything. And then when it tanked, I bought back in and I doubled my money and I immediately sold everything again. And then I've literally never touched crypto because it's so volatile and it's not really a true asset. It's only worth anything because of the speculation of what people think it's worth.
Right.
With my real estate, that first house that I bought with a $19,000 down payment, I make a 130% cash on cash return on my $19,000 every single year. 130%.
Jeez.
So, a lot of people try to get like a 10% return. I'm getting 130% cash on cash return. As far as what the equity is worth now, I think it's gotten it's about 1,000% more today than what it was before as far as what my money did. Because I think I put $19,000 into it. And then 2 years later, it was worth $180,000 more than what I paid. So that's basically like a 947% return. But then you annualize it over 2 years, so it's really only like 500%. But here's the crazy thing, right? So my real estate, and I'm sharing this because we're having a conversation and we're talking numbers, and this is going to be a
Yeah.
sensitive topic because I know that right now, especially right now, things are crazy, and if you're not an owner of assets, you're really struggling. If you're not a professional investor, you're really struggling. If you are a professional investor like me, you're doing quite well. So my real estate, I think that my net worth has increased by about $460,000 during quarantine.
During quarantine,
Yes,
460.
sir.
Whew.
$460,000 because the value of my real estate is so high, it's through the roof. So if I
Right.
wanted to sell, walk away now, literally just by me doing nothing, by the way, just the fact that I'm in the game, I own assets, I'm an investor, I have made about $460,000 in quarantine, and that doesn't actually include rental income. That's just the
Right.
value of the real estate going up.
Jeez. See, and this is the other side of it where it's like there. I guess there's two returns with real estate, whereas with typical, well, I guess there's two with stocks too. You've got sometimes dividends and
Hmm.
your gains that happen on it. But with
Yes.
this, like you're getting potentially some cash flow coming in on a monthly basis from renters, and then also just the gain on the house, the value of the house over time.
Yes. So with stocks, you have the growth of the stock, and then you also have the dividends. You pay taxes on the dividends. With real
Yep.
estate, you have the growth on the real estate, you have the rental income that it produces, and you pay no taxes on the rental income as long as you're doing it right with your depreciation schedule. So that's why I love real estate, is because you can make, I mean, you can pretty much make an infinite amount of money and pay no taxes on it. I actually did a video about how Donald Trump pays no taxes, and
Yep.
people were pretty pissed off at me for making that video. But what I did is I just showed, hey, like, love him or hate him, this is what you can do when you're an owner of real estate, and you can
Yeah.
make hundreds of millions of dollars and pay no taxes legally.
Well, and that's we do get into a touchy subject there, but this just personal opinion and what my belief has always been is like we did not create the rules. Like the
Hmm.
rules of life, we didn't get to decide what they are, but what we can do is play by the rules that are there, and that's one of the rules that have been put in place is this ability to have a certain amount of return and not have to pay taxes on it because they're accounting for depreciation and things like I'm assuming that money's going to be accounted for like upkeep and maintenance and other expenses that are going to come into it.
Right, exactly. And so what I've been talking to people about, because people are very upset about this, is what we all went to school for is go get a job. That's what school is for. It teaches you, go to college so you can get a job. The problem is when you have a job and you're an employee, you're going to pay up to 37% in taxes.
Yep.
With capital gains, you're going to pay more likely 15% taxes, up to a maximum right now of 20%. If Joe Biden wins, it's going to be more.
Mhm.
Um, with real estate, you can pay 0% legally. So I do love real estate for that reason. I would never buy real estate just for the short term. Like, real estate is certainly a long-term play for me. So if you're thinking that you want to just, make some quick money here and there, stocks might be better. But if you're thinking that you want to start this journey, I mean, as you said, so put it this way, with your $25,000, you can go and you can buy $25,000 worth of stock,
Yep.
or you can buy $500,000 worth of real estate, because you're going to leverage the rest. It's going to get paid off for you by your tenants, and you're going to get the benefits of that full 500,000. You're going to get the depreciation on 500,000. You're going to get that rental income for that asset. It's going to do well for you.
Which then goes into one of my final questions here, which is tenants, getting
Mm-hmm.
tenants in. So let's say that, and you brought up, I like that you brought up like depending on how far away I lived, because it's like, let's say in the future I move somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Now, luckily, I do have a network in Charlotte, so it's like I know people that are in the property management space. I know like handymen and stuff that are able to fix things. Um, but so those are one aspect of it, but then also the other aspect, I guess, is property management. But getting tenants in there, has that ever been a difficult process for you, or is that something that you keep a certain amount of mortgage on hand that if you can't get somebody in there for a month or 2 months, what's the standard there?
Great question. So I always recommend to have reserves in the bank. Conventional wisdom is 6 months expenses, but if you can have more, that's even better.
Mhm.
That being said, I'm in a very high demand area for rentals. There's not a lot of affordable housing here in Seattle, and that's what we provide. So we've actually never had a vacancy. So
Really?
yeah, so I've never had a problem filling a room because I literally I think we bought our first place in December of 2015. We got our first renters January 1st of 2016. Um, and then since then, we've literally never missed a month's rent across any room or any house. We've never even missed a day's rent.
And you don't have a property management company. Do you handle all that yourself with you and Angela?
I do
Or
not have a property management company, but I do have people that I rely on. So like we have a housekeeper, we have handymen that do maintenance stuff. I don't like work with a company, but I've found people to hire.
okay. And so when you're finding the tenants, you do that all yourself.
It's a combination. So we've gotten actually really lucky recently that most people who live in our houses, they tend to renew their leases,
Okay.
and they tend to give me a lot of referrals. So if if they have a friend that's needing a room for rent, they'll ask me. And we have, at this point, 35 rooms or so. And
Right.
so, when a room comes up, it's pretty easy. So I think the last, gosh, without getting too like, just fuzzy on it, because I'd have to go double check, but the last probably like 8 to 10 renters that we've gotten have all been referrals.
Okay. And I guess with tenants that are in there over an extended period of, well, actually, wait, I'll start with this. You rent out room to room.
Yes.
You don't rent out whole houses.
No.
What's the reason for that?
Um, Two things. The first thing is Ange and I, my wife Ange, we wanted to provide affordable housing in the city of Seattle, or the greater Seattle area, I should say, because not all of it's Seattle proper.
Yeah.
And the way we could do that is if we rent out individual rooms and then we include all utilities, because we can rent out a room for, $850 on the very low end, and a master bedroom on the very high end would be around 1,300. And it's
Mhm.
because studio apartments here can be over 2,000 bucks, and that doesn't include utilities or parking or anything like that. So the way we could make it affordable is if we rent it out by the bedroom. It's also more lucrative to us because we might be able to go rent out a house to a family for 3,500 bucks, but if we do it by the room, we can get double that.
Yeah.
We can get $6,000 for a single family home.
So it could be, well, it theoretically could be more effort and engagement if you weren't in such a hot market necessarily.
Certainly, yes, because there's different personalities living under one roof.
Yeah.
So
And
it could be a problem if it wasn't in such high demand.
yeah. And then I guess the other side of this, and let me know if I get too like personal here, but how do you go about like vetting the people that you're renting out rooms to?
Yeah, it's a great question. So first of all, everybody takes a background check, so everybody has to pass, and then we talk and all that stuff. I don't particularly worry too much about their credit score because most of our tenants are young.
Okay.
Um, and it's not that we only advertise to young people, that would be illegal to do, but it's the fact that it's room rentals and young people are the ones that are okay living with roommates.
Right.
So most of our tenants are in their, 20s to early 30s. We don't have a whole lot of people that are like 60 years old wanting a room for rent with four other people. We just don't really get it. So because people are young, some of them don't even have credit yet. They may have never opened a credit card. So I don't pay too much attention to their credit score. I do look at criminal history and stuff like that. Once they pass the background check, I also need to make sure that they're going to be a good fit for the house. And if they're not, I'm very honest with them. I'm like, hey, based on the things that were important to you, this house doesn't have it with the people that live here. But I do have a home right down the street, and I think it'd be a better fit. Do you want to see that too? And they actually really appreciate my transparency because nobody wants to get in a situation where they hate the roommates. I mean, that's not fun for anyone. Um,
Right.
One step further we take it is we do have one all female house, and we also have one all male house, and the rest are mixed. Within those houses, we have a housekeeper come and clean, everything once a week. We
Mhm.
label all of the shelves in the pantry. Everybody gets their own cabinet. We stock each house with like toilet paper, paper towels, hand soap, all that stuff. So nobody's fighting over that. So we try to make it as easy as possible. And by doing that, it's very helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like you've done it. You've provided a high class service. Like you've provided high tier service to tenants that rent with you, which probably explains why the uh, I guess referral rate is so high for you.
Right. Yeah. We've had actually, I've had quite a few tenants who, they have moved out because, they're done living with roommates. They want to get their own spot, and then they end up moving back. Yeah. So I've literally had, I think, 5 or 6 tenants who have like, you know what? I'm done living with roommates. I'm going to go do it in Seattle. And then they do that, and their rent is 2,000, and they're like, okay, well that's okay, I guess. But then parking's 150, and utilities are another 100, and then there's this and there's that, and there's crazy sort of like application fees and late fees. So we've had several people move out and then move back in.
Well, and that goes into a whole other aspect of this that I'll save for another conversation, because that's once I do get into this process, there's so many other considerations. How do you make your real estate desirable for renting? Which it sounds like you've considered and acted on a lot of those things. Well, I guess, and this is kind of the last little area that I'm contemplating is, if I do go down the investment property route, in your opinion, would you go well, and there's pluses and minuses to both, but would you go the route of, uh, right now I'm looking at one area, which is more like good schools would be able to rent out to a single family home. And it's in like a quieter area, or there's also, and that's like a little bit south of Charlotte. It's actually in South Carolina, but then there's also like townhouses and stuff like that in the greater Charlotte area, which would cost more, but probably have more appeal to like a younger crowd and that, I guess, demographic. Do you see a benefit? Well, do you have any opinions there? Because I realize that there's pluses and minuses to both of those scenarios.
Certainly. So the first thing, with the townhouse option, would that be like a row house where they're connected to other units, or are they standalone?
Row houses. Most of the townhouses down here are row houses.
So this is just my personal preference. I would never ever buy a townhouse that's connected to other houses unless I buy the entire building. I would
Okay.
love to buy the entire building. That's actually, it was supposed to be my goal for 2021. Shit happened, so I'm not buying an apartment building in 2021. Um,
No.
but um, but I would love to buy a big building with many units. But I would never just buy one because you can never control who's on the other side of the wall.
Right.
And you also in many cases do not own the land. So I wouldn't do that. As far as an area with good schools, I've actually, I have always invested in undervalued areas that are going through a transition because
Okay.
if you're already in a perfect area where the schools are A plus and everything like that, there's not a whole lot of appreciation that's going to happen other than just the normal appreciation rate, which is about 3.8% on average in real estate.
Right.
But if you invest in an undervalued area that is going through a transition, like if you invest in a bad area and then all of a sudden they put in a community center, a new library, the schools get better, the value of your home skyrocket, and that's exactly what has happened to us. We have, I mean, as I told you, $460,000 during quarantine. I mean, you know what I mean? Because they just put in a new hotel. The schools are getting a little bit better. They did put in a brand new community center with a pool and a library. They're updating all these things because the area was undervalued and underfunded. So I was able
Right.
to go in and buy houses for relatively cheap and just ride the wave up.
Okay. And I'm assuming that those are all things that you did research on before you ended up buying those houses.
Yeah, certainly. And again, there's no crystal ball or anything, but I just looked at proximity to Seattle and Bellevue, Renton, the area that I'm in, easy access to all of those things, and then activities that are going on in those areas, conversations with the mayor. I talked to the mayor of the city about things he wanted to do. And that's also a good, if you can get a politician on your side,
Yeah, seriously.
that's not bad. That's not bad at all. But yeah, just researching your market just like you would for a stock. I mean, the way I buy stocks is I look at the business. I don't even really pay attention to the stock price. I look at the business. I look at who's the CEO, who's running the company, how is the company doing as a whole, and then I try to think, if I were to buy this entire company, what would I be willing to pay to buy Coca-Cola? What would I be willing to pay to buy all of Facebook, right? And then and then I come up with a number. If the number that I chose is less than what the stock price is in proportion, um, then I buy. Like if basically, so to, unless in case I made that confusing, if I'm willing to pay, let's say I'll just use easy numbers because this is not going to be it at all. But if I'm willing to pay, let's say $1,000 for all of Facebook, right? And that means that, oh, well, their stocks are $10 each. If I go on Facebook and their stocks are $8, then I buy those stocks.
Yeah,
And I know those are just arbitrary numbers because that is not what Facebook stock is going for right now. But that's how I look at things. I look at stocks as buying businesses, and I look at houses as buying businesses, and I look at what's going on around it and who's the leadership in that area and all those things.
absolutely. Well, great. That you have given me plenty of, the gears are turning. You've given me plenty to consider and think on, and it really just comes down to, I think, opportunity. Like, I've been doing the research, but now it's scouring. I guess this is the final question: is any advice on where to look? Right now, I've just been setting filters and like pre-saved searches on Zillow. Any other advice on how to be looking for criteria that on houses that might be a good fit?
Yeah. So, 4 out of the 6 properties that I bought were actually off market deals.
Okay.
So they actually weren't even on Redfin or Zillow. But I would look at Redfin and Zillow. If you want to get into multifamily, I would look at LoopNet. I would also reach out to people in your market that might be real estate agents or people that are like builders. And I would see if they are coming up with anything on the market that you can get and not get in a bidding war with. That would be really good. If you can find something off market and just go in and swoop it, then that would be great. And here's one thing that I'll leave you with. So
Yeah.
the houses that you're looking at are about $250,000. You don't need to put 10% down. Depending on what bank you use, you can put 5% down and still have no PMI. So what if you do this? That would mean you put basically $12,500 on a house, right? You put that down. What if you take the rest of your pile of money and you put it in stocks? And then you can see which one performs better,
I like that.
right? I mean, if you have a chunk of, let's say, $25,000,
Yep.
go buy your house, live in it, start living for free or at reduced cost. Also take 12,500, put it in the index funds you wanted. At the end of 18 months, you'll have all the data. And you'll be like, hey, I did both, and here's what happened, and here's the return I got from stocks, and here's the return I got from real estate.
I like that. Now that kind of answers that solves the problem. See, this is why I needed to talk with you, because
Yeah.
that is a great way to see both, well, to actually engage in both.
You know what's funny? Because people ask me all the time, they're like, hey, should I fund a Roth IRA or should I fund my 401k? And I'm like, both, bitch. Like, you don't need to pick one. Like, you want 2 of them.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
any
this is such a simple answer that I was just blind to see it. But it actually does help to know about the percentage down thing, because the answer is just do both. And there is a possibility without increasing the amount of money that I'm investing. I can still do both.
Yeah, well, here's the question, right? So I'm going to make an assumption here, and I'm going to say that you would like to be wealthy.
Yeah, crazy good assumption. Yes.
All right. So then the question is, okay, stocks are real estate, but Andrew Barta, you are in phenomenal shape. Flex that bicep. You're in phenomenal shape. So
Yes.
if somebody goes to you and says, Andrew, I want to have a good body, should I either eat right or should I get consistent exercise?
Both.
Exactly.
There
Both.
it is.
You want
Dang.
both.
You the analogies, man. You got them nailed
Thank
down.
I try.
Perfect. Well, then that you've actually changed a lot of my search criteria that I've been looking on. So some of the areas I've been looking in are like those A plus. The appreciation might not be as good as it could be in other areas. So I'm gonna have to do some more research, modify some of those searches, and and this is what I was gonna ask: how do you go about finding those off market deals?
Good question. So I would see if any agents in your area or any wholesalers know of off-market deals, and I would also look at who the builders are in your city. So
Okay.
4 out of the 6 deals I bought off-market, and I worked with the same builder on 4 of these deals.
Okay.
So building companies in your market.
And there are a ton of building companies down here that are putting up like these complexes all over.
Hmm.
You would just consider going, talking with them, and
Doesn't hurt. I mean, you're just going directly to them, like, hey, you're building this house that's 4 bedroom, 2.5 bathroom, and instead of paying 6% in 6% commission to a real estate agent, instead of paying to list it on Redfin or Zillow, how would I just buy it from you, and you don't have to worry about going through an agent, and you keep your 6%.
okay, yeah, awesome. Well, again, you've given me plenty. This has been tremendously helpful. So thank you. I appreciate you and this, and it gives me direction, which feels nice.
Awesome. Well, dude, this was great. Thank you for coming on. I hope I answered your questions, and I hope everybody got some value out of this. And if you ever want to talk again, you know where to find me.
Absolutely.
Cool, man. Peace.
Peace.